Welcome back, everybody. Today we'll be talking about leopard geckos and some of their surprises. And Leroy is gone, but he will be back soon for ya. As I said, stay tuned and tubed. So pardon the slight stains you can see there, but this is because there usually is the water bowl for Jane, because this is really Jane's spot usually, or she uses it to drink and sometimes bask, because the window, as you can see, is rather close, and this is really what she uses as well. So this is a share house, basically, reptiles amongst them, amongst each other. So the first thing I can debunk about leopard geckos is that they are really easy to handle and that they are sitting perfectly still. They don't. They're constantly trying to jump off some things, at least Leroy does, and this is really something that you got to keep in mind, especially when having children, that they know how to react to them properly. Because as you can see, he would easily jump now, and you got to be very careful about that. What I love about Leroy is that he has his own mind, basically. I think this is pretty cool. He's a little bit like a cat, a mix between a cat and a dog and a reptile, if you will, and does his own thing at all times. But we're rather similar in that regard. So this is pretty cool. But this is also something that most people don't know, because they think they are this perfect pat, almost like a bull python sitting still, and you don't have to worry about them whatsoever. This is false. But if you keep all these things in mind, then you shouldn't have any problem with your leopard gecko. And as you can see, he's also rather active. So this is something that most people also misunderstand, thinking you can put them in small boxes and they're just fine. So he is in a 4-foot enclosure, 120 centimeters. And this is really almost a bare minimum I would like to give him. Because sometimes I also let him run around the hall, and he utilizes all those spaces. And this is really something that people misunderstand about them. And I hopefully debunk this. I do not handle him very often, so in case you're worried about me overhandling him or whatever, I tell you this is not the case. This is really something. Sorry that I'm a little distracted all the time, because I really have to focus on him as well. So yeah, it was easier with Jane, a lot easier, definitely. The video, maybe you saw it the other day, the previous one, she was perfectly fine and the one take was no problem whatsoever. But with him, that's a whole different story. So anyways, I rambled off a bit. What I find rather curious about Leroy is, I'm not sure whether you have the same issue, but whenever I take a photo of him, he absolutely doesn't look the way I want him to look. As you can see here, he's rather dark. And yeah, this is really the natural color, and he's very naturally colored. But he has head for blizzard, so he also has a slight lilac tone to him. But other than that, he's a rather natural one. I'm a fan of the natural ones, the wild types, also the boa constrictors and so on. Even though there are some morphs, I really am more about the natural colorations in reptiles. But each to their own, eh? But taking photos with him is a challenge, because I really want to show the pictures as natural as possible. And this with him sometimes is a challenge, definitely. Another thing about leopard geckos is that they are also smaller animals. Yes, they are small, but not that small. So it's a good size lizard, I would say. It's not really a bearded dragon, but it's definitely a good size lizard. And you probably should keep that in mind as well. I think it's a good size to handle, even though my hands are rather large. This is really almost the bare minimum what I want to handle, because even with him sometimes I can't really touch him the way I want to. So basically, if I want to like give him a little rub on his chin or something, I have to be extra careful that I do not touch his eye or something like that. Because yeah, to me they're very fragile, and this is really I'm more into larger or medium-sized reptiles. So for instance, gargoyle geckos also are awesome, but they're tiny, fragile things, and I probably wouldn't even handle them, because for the reasons I just mentioned. So Leroy really sometimes can just easily pet him. Just gotta be super careful about it. And what he also likes is if you give him a little head rub. Enjoys that. It's a little slightly out of focus. Sorry about that. It really is not the best camera. So I'll try to change that for future references. Other than that, I'm not too unhappy about it. So yeah, you can see gets his little cuddle time as well, even though sometimes slightly reluctant. We are a good team and try to have the best time. All right, everybody. Another misconception about geckos or leopard geckos is that they require to be fed every 2 to 3 days. In my opinion, they get too fat this way. They have the fat tail, just basically works like a camel's tail, camel's hump. That's what it's called, I reckon. And yeah, so they basically save the fat reserves in those tails. Thus, they do not require to be fed as often. The previous owner, by the way, Leroy, is roughly 4 years old, and I kept him for like a year now. So basically almost the entire crisis, my crisis animal. And yeah, Leroy is fed every other week, really, or every week. So I try not to feed him like his previous owner every fortnight or 2 weeks. That's just not what I have in mind, even though they might be that way in the wild. Is still more or less of a pet even though I'd like to see them more as what they are, reptiles. They're a whole different species in general, and we shouldn't humanize them too much. There is a word for it, but I forgot it. So yeah, Leroy really is, as you can see, one of a kind. Quite literally a handful, but a fun one at that. But I was surprised how different he was to what I expected. What's also interesting is that the way they feel. I made a video about that. If you want to know how reptiles feel like, go check it out. But he is very plated, or they are plated. Basically almost like a crocodile, which surprised me really because they look so soft. But he's a rather tough one at that. Speaking of tough, Leroy is definitely a tough guy. He, for instance, when he encountered Jane once through the window, basically, he was the one who charged at her and tried to basically attack her, and she was absolutely not interested in him. Couldn't be bothered at all. But yeah, Leroy is quite a tough guy. Hence the name, Leroy. Almost royal. Yeah, he's a cool fella, and I'm really glad having him and giving him the best possible life in his large vivarium. And I think you got to know him a bit more, I think a little more in a realistic way, because this is not staged, obviously. You cannot stage these things. So might have been a bit distracted. I hope you don't mind too much. But I'm basically always winging my videos. I think it's a more natural way. I just like to keep things authentic. And yeah, I'm that kind of guy. So if that's what you enjoy, then awesome. Thank you for your support, and I think this is a good moment to basically cut the video, and Leroy is almost off again. So cheers so much for listening, and have a great one.
And if you like what you just saw, make sure to hit that like button, also the subscribe button, as well as the bell not to miss any future videos. You can also follow the Reptigade's journey on Instagram for even more awesome content.